Okay, so problem number one, we had some squirrels living in the bell housing apparently, and the clutch and pressure plate were not connected to the flywheel, which tells me someone had this bad boy apart. The other thing is this assembly here doesn't want to come off. So, I'm gonna have to do some figuring on that. The other thing is, that's kind of a mess in there. Definitely gonna need at least a new bearing. And yeah, pulled out the spark plugs. Took a peek through with a flashlight. All the apex seals are intact, but I obviously can't really get a good compression test on it, you know, without it having the starter and everything hooked up. So just gonna kind of call that a wrap for tonight. Back up and punt, so to speak. And you know, hopefully in the next day or so, get this guy up on an engine stand and start pulling some of the peripherals and stuff off and go from there. So that's kind of where we are with things at the moment, and we will continue another day. So we are back here in the garage, and we're about to get started. I just took the starter to our friends over at Advanced Auto Parts and they tested it for me. Bendix is coming out strong. It looked like it was going to function, so I'll be able to put the transmission and everything back together in order to hook up a battery and get a compression test on this thing and see if we have good compression or not. So that's the next thing we're going to be doing. I'm going to be pulling the pressure plate off and just throw it back in there just so I can get the transmission on it and get things started. So that's where we are, and we'll go from there. Okay there, moment of truth. Let's see if she cranks over and if we get compression. Here we go. Well, looks like we got 99, 97, and 94. We're going to probably run another test here. With it cranking over, the oil pump's running, and it is definitely busting out the ooze. So we are going to run this test one more time on the rear rotor, and then we'll switch to the front. That way I'm not running this thing completely out of oil. Alright, so we've got a couple of tests done, and it looks like we've got anywhere from 98, 101, and 104. And then we had a 98, 104, and 100, so we're all pretty close to 100 there, which is good news on the rear. We're going to switch things up and then test the front. Alright, now we got things switched around. You can see I'm now testing the front. I'm going to crank it over and see what we get. 0 results. Okay, so I gave it one try on the front rotor, but it didn't register, so I'm going to try this again, and here's take 2. Strange. I'm not getting a reading at this point from the rotary compression tester here. It just keeps saying begin cranking. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. So I think what I might do is just turn this guy off, and being that the starter's a little warm at this point and the battery's probably running a little bit low, you can kind of see I just have it hooked up to jumper cables here. We're going to back up and punt and give it another try here in a minute. Okay, front rotor test 3. Here we go. Well, I'm still not getting a good enough reading. I'm going to try swapping these back out and seeing. I'm hoping that there's not something wrong with the tester. Either that or the front rotor has lost all compression, but I'm pretty sure in the instructions it says that you can't, if it doesn't get an accurate reading, it'll just show up as 20 psi across the board. So I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm a little nervy about running this guy and having the oil come out of the front of it into a catch pan, but that's kind of nature of the beast whenever you're dealing with a motor that's out of a car. I'm fortunate enough to get this with a transmission and starter so that I'll be able to, you know, actually test compression, whereas if I'd have just bought a short block, there's no way I'd really be able to spin the crank at a minimum of 160 RPMs to see if I can get adequate to register. So we're gonna just try this again really quick on the back and see where we get. It came up pretty darn quick on the back side, so here we go on this guy. Let's test it out. Okay, again we're getting readings close to 100 on the back rotor, and it came through pretty darn quick. So I'm just gonna switch this over. Even with the battery starting to die down a little bit, I was able to at least get a reading out of it. Whenever I'm cranking it over, and what's worrisome, and I don't know if you can tell because the audio quality on my camera isn't super great, but you can kind of hear it's much louder on the rear rotor than it is in the front. The gusts of air coming out of it as I'm cranking it over are much more prominent, and you can kind of hear that it has better compression in the back. So I'm thinking that this front rotor is probably losing compression in either apex seals or possibly the side seals. I don't know yet. But the fact that I can't even get it to register on the tester is what's telling me that something's rotten in Denmark. So we're gonna give this one last go here and see what we can do. Begin cranking. Here we go. So far I've learned that it looks like the front rotor doesn't have any compression whatsoever. I did try it a couple more times to just see and switch it around, but I'm not getting a reading whatsoever out of the rotary compression tester, which tells me that it's probably zip. From what I understood, from the instructions, they said if you have a reading, it'll just read 20 psi across the board, and I'm not even getting that. I don't think it's even registering the fact that that the motor's spinning around, which is a little disappointing. But cold engine numbers around 100 isn't bad, but you can usually expect, I think, a loss from the research and stuff that I've done. You can expect a loss of around 10 psi or whatever whenever it's warm, or maybe that number goes up. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to do a little bit more reading. But by the looks of things, we're going to be tearing this bad boy down and pulling it apart and doing a full rebuild on it, which will be fun. I'm going to have to find some manuals and stuff online and figure that stuff out. But we're making progress. It's only day 2 at this point, so I'm excited to be making a little bit of progress and at least having a better idea and familiarizing myself with the motor a little bit more. It's a really interesting motor. I've always been fascinated by them ever since I owned one whenever I was in my teens, and now I've, for whatever reason, decided to get back into rotaries and have some fun with it. So that's where we are with things, and we'll keep you posted as progress goes along, and I'll try to document and not bore everyone too much with the little ins and outs. But if I find something neat or interesting, or if I find something that's catastrophically wrong, then obviously I want to document that so that I can look back on this and say, remember when things were easy and the engine was out of the car and blah blah blah. So we'll get that figured out and go from there. So it's going to be what looks to be a little bit more involved than what I thought it was going to be, but it's still exciting, and I'm glad to be moving along more. So stay tuned. Quick side note, I just wanted to thank my wife for putting up with my nonsense with all this rotary RX-7 baloney. It's been a dream of mine for a long time. She's been super supportive of my craziness, and she even is as supportive enough to buy me these really cool coasters, which are Doritos, and I feel blessed to have such an awesome partner in crime, and one that supports me throughout all my madness and tinkering and stuff in the garage, and for putting up with my nonsense. So hopefully all you other people out there are lucky enough to find what I have found, and that's all, and hopefully she'll see this someday and it will make her smile. So that's all I had.